Conservative media is at war with itself. Candace Owens is calling Ben Shapiro a parasite. Megyn Kelly seems obsessed with Mark Levin's manhood. Tucker Carlson's been exchanging text messages with Iranian leaders, and now he's claiming that the CIA is framing him as a foreign agent. And nobody's getting off scot-free here. Mark Levin, a guy that I normally agree with, he's responded with all kinds of personal venom that makes it impossible to hear what he's even trying to say. When your defense of the truth sounds indistinguishable from a bar fight, you've already lost the room. But here's what we'll miss if we're not careful. Underneath the name calling, the conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk, the conspiracy theories about Erica Kirk, the accusations about Israel, there's a theology. It's an old one, and it's one that the church debated and rejected almost 2,000 years ago. It's called replacement theology. It's the idea that God's done with Israel, that the church took their spot, that the Jewish people are no longer part of God's covenantal plan. That's why Candace Owens can call Ben Shapiro part of the Synagogue of Satan. What she's doing is she's proof texting Revelation 2:9. So that's what we're going to get into today. And we're going to see how that theology is DOA. So let's name what we're dealing with here. Replacement theology. Scholars will call it supersessionism. It teaches that when Israel rejected Jesus, that God revoked his covenant with the Jewish people and transferred it to the church. The church now becomes the new Israel. It basically says the promises that God made Abraham, they canceled. Now this idea doesn't come from the Bible. It comes from 2nd century church fathers who were trying to distance Christianity from Judaism after the Roman wars. Men like Justin Martyr and Origen, they said things about the Jewish people that would make us wince today. But by the time we get to John Chrysostom in the 300s, you have sermons called Against the Jews being preached from church pulpits. And that theology that God broke his covenant with Israel, it became the justification for 15 centuries of persecution. Pogroms, forced conversions, ghettos, the theological root system underneath European anti-Semitism. It's this. And now it's showing up in podcast studios. It's a different accent, but the same theology. Candace Owens converted to Catholicism in 2024. So did Carrie Jean Bowler, the former Miss California who just got removed from Trump's own Religious Liberty Commission because she declared that Catholics do not embrace Zionism. She defended Candace Owens by name. She said that her conversion was about repudiating evangelical Christian Zionism. Paula White told her to stop posting about replacement theology, and she refused. And look, I want you to understand what's happening here. These people have me agreeing with Paula White on theology. That's how far off the rails this thing's gone. Now, to be fair, yes, historically there have been segments of Catholic theology that have been more open to supersessionism than Protestant traditions. But, to be fair, the modern Catholic Church officially rejects it. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter what denomination you're in. If you believe that God broke his covenant with Israel, you have a Bible problem. A big one. Let's look at Genesis 12. God calls a man named Abram out of Ur, and he says 3 things. I'll make you a great nation. I will bless those who bless you. And in you, all the families on the earth shall be blessed. That's the Abrahamic covenant, and it's unconditional. God doesn't say if you behave, I'll bless you. He says, I will, full stop. But it gets stronger. In Genesis 15, God tells Abraham to cut animals in half and lay pieces in 2 rows. Now, this was an ancient Near Eastern covenant ritual. Both parties were supposed to walk between the pieces together, and the symbolism was this: if I break this covenant, let what happened to these animals happen to me. But Abraham doesn't walk through. God puts him to sleep, and a smoking fire pot and flaming torch, both representing God, pass between the pieces by themselves. God made the covenant with himself. Abraham's not even awake, which means that Abraham can't break it, Israel can't break it, because Israel didn't make the covenant. God did, alone, while Abraham slept. That's Genesis 15. And replacement theology has to deal with that chapter. It can't do it. Now, did Israel fail? Absolutely. The Old Testament's a record of their failure. Golden calves, idol worship, kings who sacrificed children to Moloch. God will send them prophets, and they would still rebel. But here's the thing that the prophets say while they were exiled. Not before, but during. In Jeremiah 31, 35, and 36, God says, if the fixed order of the sun and moon and stars ceases from before me, declares the Lord, then shall the offspring of Israel cease from being a nation before me forever. Take a look outside. After you watch this, of course. But the sun came up this morning. The covenant's still active. And let's not forget that Jeremiah is writing this while Jerusalem's in a pile of rubble. The temple's been destroyed, the people are in chains, and God says, even now I haven't revoked it, and I'm not going to. My covenant with Israel will last as long as the sun burns. And then we have Ezekiel 36, which was in the same period of time. God says that he's going to regather them, not because they earned it, not for your sake, O house of Israel, but for my holy name's sake. God's reputation is tied to this covenant. If he breaks it, then he's a liar. So when someone tells you that God's replaced Israel with the church, just ask them a simple question. When? Show me the verse. Show me where God says the covenant I made with Abraham, the one I swore by myself, I'm canceling it. It doesn't exist. Now let's talk about that phrase that Candace Owens used against Ben Shapiro, the Synagogue of Satan. It's in Revelation 2:9. And she's not the only one that's used it. This phrase has been weaponized against the Jewish people for centuries. It's one of the most abused texts in the entire New Testament. But here's what it actually says. Jesus is speaking to the church in Smyrna, and he says, I know the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Let's read that again. Those who say they are Jews and are not. Jesus isn't calling Jewish people satanic. He's calling out a specific group of people in Smyrna who were claiming to be Jews, and they weren't. Their identity was false. Their claim was fraudulent. Now, scholars are going to debate exactly who this refers to. Some will say it's Gentile God-fearers who adopted Jewish identity to gain legal protection under Roman law. Others may say it's a local group using ethnic claims to persecute believers. Either way, the text is about false claims of Jewishness. It's not a condemnation of the Jewish people. So using this verse as an excuse to attack a Jewish person is the exact opposite of what the text says. It's not just bad theology, it's textual illiteracy. But here's where Paul puts the nail in the coffin. In Romans 11, Paul asks this question directly. In verse 1 he asks, has God rejected his people? And then he gives the answer, by no means. That should end the debate. But it doesn't, so Paul builds an argument that takes up the entire chapter. He uses an image, an olive tree. The root is Abraham, the patriarchs, the covenant. The natural branches are Israel. And some of those branches, yes, they were broken off. Paul admits this because of their unbelief. He states that Jesus grafts in these wild olive branches. That's us, Gentile believers. We got spliced into the tree. We have access to the root, the sap, the life, the covenant blessings. But here's what Paul says next, and this is the part that replacement theology skips. In verse 18, do not be arrogant toward the branches. If you are, remember, you do not support the root. The root supports you. Gentile believers don't support the root. The root supports us. The Abrahamic covenant is not ours to claim as a replacement. It's ours to be grafted into. Paul is talking to Gentile Christians in Rome who were starting to get arrogant. They were starting to think they replaced Israel. And he says, watch yourself. If God didn't spare the natural branches, he's not going to spare you either. Then he drops the biggest line, verse 25. A partial hardening has come upon Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles has come in. And in this way, all Israel will be saved. Israel's hardening is partial and it's temporary. It has an expiration date. And when that day comes, God's going to finish what he started with Abraham. Verse 29 is the kill shot. The gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. Irrevocable. That's Paul's word, not mine. The covenant that God made in Genesis 15, the one that he swore by himself, Paul says it can't be taken back. See, replacement theology is not just historically dangerous, it's exegetically DOA. Paul killed it in Romans 11. Folks just stopped reading it. When Candace Owens promotes a discredited 1871 anti-Semitic book about the Talmud, she's standing in a line that stretches back to John Chrysostom. When Tucker Carlson buys property in Qatar, texts Iranian regime officials, calls the war on Iran absolutely disgusting and evil, and claims that Chabad is stoking the religious war, then acts surprised that the CIA was reading from those texts? That's not journalism. That's alignment. And the theology underneath it says that God is done with the Jews. And by the way, the CIA wasn't spying on Tucker. They were spying on Iran. They're surveilling a designated state sponsor of terrorism. And when you text people inside of that regime, your messages are going to show up in the collection. That's not a conspiracy against a podcaster. That's how intelligence works. Tucker wasn't the target. He was the discovery. It always ends here, every time, for 1,700 years. Now, is the other side handling this well? No. Levine calling people evil and diabolical on social media. Shapiro's calling Megyn Kelly a coward from the stage. They're all making it impossible for anybody to hear them because they're screaming through clenched teeth. But here's the difference, and I need to be clear about this. Bad manners and bad theology aren't the same sin. Levine's tone's a problem, but Owens' theology is a danger. And no, I don't align with Ben Shapiro theologically either. I believe that Jesus was born of a virgin. I believe he lived a completely sinless life. I believe he was nailed to a cross for our sins. And I believe that on the third day he rose out of the tomb and he's coming back for us. But Ben Shapiro's devoutly Jewish. He doesn't claim to be Christian. Owens does. And her theology gives Christians permission to write off an entire people group that God says he's not finished with. And while we're here, let's talk about Christ as King. Yes, Christ is King. That's not controversial. That's the creed. Every Christian should affirm that. But when you use that phrase as a weapon, when you drop it in a fight with a Jewish man or a Jewish woman the way that Owens has done with Shapiro, the way Nick Fuentes leads chants of it at rallies when he's also praising Hitler, When it becomes merch on a website or a sticker on a Stanley Cup, you're using the Lord's name to assert dominance over a people group. There's a commandment about that. Third one on the list. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. That's not about cussing. It's about invoking God's name to authorize something that God never authorized. Yes, Christ is king, and he's also Jewish. And we're going to give an account for how we use his name. If you're a Christian and you've been told that God has replaced Israel, go read Romans 11. The whole chapter. Paul anticipated this exact error. He wrote an entire argument against it. He called it arrogance, and he warned us. Now, we've explored in other videos how Deuteronomy 32 describes God disinheriting the nations and setting Israel apart. How Psalm 82 describes the judgment of the rebellious spiritual rulers over the nations. The gospel is a story of God reclaiming what was lost at Babel. And Israel's the root of the entire operation. Cut the root and you kill the tree. And that's exactly what replacement theology tries to do. And one more thing. Paul was a Pharisee, trained under Gamaliel, Hebrew of Hebrews. And after his conversion, after Damascus, after Arabia, after 14 years of ministry, he writes Romans 11 and says, I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, and a member of the tribe of Benjamin. He didn't stop being Jewish when he became a follower of Jesus. He didn't trade one identity for another. He carried both, because in the biblical story, they weren't supposed to be in conflict. The gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. That's the Bible's answer to replacement theology. It's been there for 2,000 years. Maybe it's time folks actually read it. I appreciate you watching. I have a couple of other videos right here. And if this interested you, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. God bless you.